After 35 years, absent father returns to leave me his entire fortune instead of his family. All right, so here's the deal. I'm a 35-year-old woman and I grew up without a dad. My mom was a total rock star and raised me on her own after my dad bailed when I was just a baby. Honestly, I never gave him much thought because my mom was all the parent I needed, and I had a pretty sweet childhood despite his absence. Fast forward to about 5 years ago, and out of nowhere, I get this random message on social media from a dude claiming to be my father. My first thought was, yeah, right, this has got to be some kind of scam. But after a little back and forth and some serious verification, I realized it was actually him. He said he'd been looking for me for years and wanted to reconnect. I was super hesitant. I mean, this guy was MIA my whole life and now he suddenly wants to play dad? But yeah, curiosity got the best of me, so I agreed to meet him for coffee. That first coffee date? Awkward with a capital A. He tried to explain why he left, saying he was young and scared and had made a huge mistake. He also mentioned he had a new family now, a wife and 2 kids, my half-siblings. He said he always regretted leaving my mom and me and wanted to make things right. So over the next few months, we started seeing each other now and then, coffee here, lunch there. We talked about our lives, and it was weird, like trying to bond with a total stranger who happened to be my biological father. One day, he casually mentioned that he had a successful business and was doing pretty well financially. He hinted at wanting to make things right with me, whatever that meant. I straight up told him I wasn't after his money. I just wanted to get to know him. Things were going okay until I started noticing some red flags. Every time I asked about meeting his wife and kids, he'd get all evasive and change the subject. We always met in public places, never at his home. And sometimes he'd make weird comments comparing me to my half-siblings like, "You're so driven and hardworking, not like my other kids who've had everything handed to them." Or, "You look just like me, much more than my other children." It started feeling like he was trying to relive some idealized version of fatherhood with me while keeping me separate from his real family. I began pulling back, and our meetings became less frequent. The last time I saw him, about 6 months ago, he looked super stressed and agitated. He dropped the bomb that he had terminal cancer and only had a few months left. I was stunned. Here was this man I barely knew, telling me he was dying. He said he wanted to make sure I was taken care of and mentioned updating his will. Again, I told him I didn't want his money, that he should focus on his wife and kids. He got upset and said they didn't need it and he wanted to do something for me. I left that meeting feeling all kinds of unsettled. After that, radio silence. I figured he was spending his remaining time with his family. Then last week, I got a call from a lawyer saying my father had passed away. I felt a confusing mix of emotions, but what the lawyer said next really floored me. My father had left his entire estate to me in his will. His house, his business, his savings, everything. Nothing for his wife and other kids. I was stunned. This was the last thing I expected or wanted. The lawyer explained that the will was ironclad and had been updated just weeks before his death. He also mentioned there was a sealed letter for me. Before I could even process this, my phone blew up with calls and messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Turns out it was my father's wife and my half-siblings. They had somehow gotten my contact info and were furious about the will. My half-sister, who's about 25, sent me a long, angry message accusing me of manipulating our father in his final days. My half-brother, who's 28, left me a voicemail full of threats and expletives, saying they'd fight this in court. Their mom tried a different approach. She sent me a tearful message about how devastated they all were, how they were struggling financially, and how they just wanted what my father would have wanted. She begged me to share the inheritance. I was overwhelmed and needed time to think, so I didn't respond to any of them. I decided to read my father's letter before making any decisions. What I found in that letter was mind-blowing. My father explained that he had always regretted leaving my mom and me. He said he had tried to make amends in his final months, but also revealed some painful truths about his other family. Apparently, neither of his other kids were biologically his. He found out through a DNA test and confronted his wife, who admitted to multiple affairs. She had manipulated him for years, keeping him in line with these kids who weren't even his. She'd even pressured him to stay away from me, threatening to take everything in a divorce. In his pain and anger, he decided to leave everything to me, his only biological child. He wrote that his other children had grown up spoiled and entitled, squandering opportunities and money he'd given them over the years. He felt that leaving them his fortune would only enable more bad behavior. The letter ended with him asking for my forgiveness and saying this inheritance was his way of trying to make things right. He hoped I'd use it to build a good life and maybe even help others. After reading the letter, I felt a deep sadness. I didn't know my father well, but the time we spent together showed me he was a good man with a good heart. I decided not to engage with his family's messages. Instead, I had my lawyer send them a formal letter explaining that I had no intention of contesting the will or sharing the inheritance. I didn't mention the contents of my father's letter. This set off another round of drama. My half-siblings started a social media campaign, painting me as a gold-digging homewrecker who had seduced their poor dying father. They posted old family photos and talked about what a wonderful dad he had been, conveniently leaving out my existence. Some of their friends and extended family members started harassing me online, calling me horrible names and accusing me of tearing a grieving family apart. A few even made vague threats about what would happen if I didn't give back the money. So, here's the deal. One day, my half-sibling's mom just showed up at my workplace. She was crying and making a huge scene, saying they were about to lose their home and that my dad wouldn't have wanted this. My coworkers were all like, "What is even happening?" And I had to get security to escort her out. Through all this, I've kept my mouth shut. I haven't responded to their accusations or tried to defend myself, but man, it's been tough. Sometimes I really want to share my dad's letter and set the record straight, but I know it would just cause more drama. I did reach out to my mom, and she was totally shocked but very supportive. She filled me in on some stuff about my dad. Apparently, he tried to come back when I was about 5, saying he made a huge mistake. But when she found out he had another family, she told him to back off. That kind of explains why he said he'd been looking for me for years. Now, about the inheritance. I'm still figuring things out. The business my dad left me is doing really well, but I have no clue how to run it. I'm thinking of selling it and maybe starting a scholarship fund for kids from single-parent homes. It feels like a good way to honor my mom's hard work and my dad's final wishes. The house is another issue. It's in a different state, and honestly, it's way too big and fancy for me. I'm planning to sell that too and donate some of the money to a cancer charity in memory of my dad. My half-siblings are still threatening to sue, but my lawyer says they don't have a case. The will is solid, and there's no evidence I manipulated my dad. Still, I'm gearing up for a long and ugly court battle if it comes to that. I know I didn't do anything wrong. I never asked for this money or tried to influence my dad's decision, but it still feels weird keeping it all when I know his other family is struggling. So, Reddit, am I the jerk for not sharing the inheritance with them? Update 1. Hey. Reddit, it's been about 6 months since my last post, and things have gotten even more complicated. I'm still trying to get my head around everything that happened after inheriting my dad's estate. When I first found out, I was totally shocked. But now, well, it's just complicated and stressful. I inherited not just his house and savings, but also his business. And let me tell you, I had no clue how to run a business. My dad's company was huge, with tons of employees, contracts, clients, the whole shebang. I tried to learn as much as I could, but it was super overwhelming. To make things worse, my half-siblings and their mom have been making my life hell. They've been sending nasty messages, spreading lies about me on social media, and even showing up at my workplace to make a scene. The stress has been seriously affecting my mental health. I've been seriously thinking about selling the business. It feels more like a burden than anything else, but I also feel responsible for the employees. My lawyer and I have been discussing options, but it's a tough call. As for the lawsuit, my half-siblings and their mom officially filed one, claiming I manipulated my dad into changing his will. They even accused me of elder abuse, saying I isolated him and pressured him into leaving everything to me. It's all nonsense, but it's still scary. My lawyer has been fantastic, though, even suggesting I file a countersuit for defamation. Our first day in court was a nightmare. Their lawyer brought out all this so-called evidence, which was mostly out-of-context messages. But then my lawyer presented the letter from my dad, explaining why he left everything to me. The courtroom went silent, and my dad's wife, who had been looking all smug, broke down in tears. She admitted to multiple affairs and even owning up to knowing about me all along. My half-siblings were stunned and stormed out. The judge ruled in my favor, saying the will was valid. After the trial, things got even messier. My half-siblings cut off their mom and felt totally betrayed. I started getting anonymous threats, which was terrifying. I installed security cameras just to feel safe. I've decided it's time to let go of the house and the business. The house is too big, and in another state, so I'm selling it and planning to donate some of the proceeds to a cancer charity in memory of my dad. As for the business, it was a tough decision, but I knew I couldn't keep running it. Then, one of my dad's longtime business partners approached me with an offer to buy the company. He promised to keep all the employees and run it with the same care my dad did. After some negotiations, we finalized the deal. Now, I'm investing the money from the sale and planning to build a life that honors both my mom's hard work and my dad's final wishes. Just wanted to share a bit about my journey over the past year. Everything was so new to me at first, but I'm finally starting to feel like I can move on. I've learned a ton about myself, my family, and what it really means to make peace with the past. Big thanks to everyone who offered advice and support. It meant more than you know. Update #2. Hey folks, it's been a year since I inherited my father's estate, and I thought I'd fill you in on how things have been going. After dealing with the legal mess, selling the business, and handling the fallout from my dad's will, I decided it was time for a fresh start. I moved to a new city where no one knew about my past, my father, or the drama with my half-siblings. It's been a bit of a whirlwind. I've been focusing on smart investments with the money I received and finding ways to give back, just like my dad hoped I would. I even set up a scholarship fund for kids from single-parent homes to honor my mom's hard work raising me. It feels really good to be doing something positive with the money, and I hope it makes a difference for others who grew up like I did. Life's been pretty quiet and I've been enjoying the peace. But recently, something unexpected happened. I was at the hospital for a regular checkup and ran into my half-brother. I almost didn't recognize him at first. He looked so different from the person I remembered. He was sitting in the waiting room, looking exhausted. When our eyes met, he seemed just as shocked to see me as I was to see him. We ended up talking, and he told me he'd been having a really tough time since the trial. He and his sister had cut ties with their mom and had been struggling. He'd even been living on the streets for a while and recently found out he needed an expensive medical treatment he couldn't afford. Hearing this brought up a lot of mixed feelings. On one hand, I felt for him. He's still my half-brother, and it was hard seeing him in such a bad situation. But on the other hand, I couldn't forget how he'd treated me during the legal battle. The accusations, the harassment, the threats. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to help, but I was also scared of being manipulated again. So, I talked to my lawyer about it and asked what the risks would be if I decided to help him. My lawyer advised caution, but suggested I could help him anonymously through a trust. After thinking it over, I decided I couldn't just walk away from him, but I also needed to protect myself. I set up a trust in his name with the condition that the money could only be used for his medical expenses. This way, I could help him without opening myself up to more drama. My lawyer handled the details, and to this day, my half-brother doesn't know I'm the one who set up the trust. I hope it helps him get the treatment he needs and get back on his feet. I think I've shared everything I can remember, so I'm stepping away from the keyboard to live my life a bit. Thanks for listening, Reddit. Until next update, bye. Mini update. Unfortunately, things didn't go as smoothly as I'd hoped. Not long after setting up the trust, I found out my half-brother's health had deteriorated rapidly, and he needed emergency surgery. I didn't know if I should try to reach out or just let things be. In the end, I decided not to get directly involved. Figured if he wanted to reconnect, he would have by now. I heard through some people that he made it through the surgery, but his condition is still touch and go. I hope he pulls through, but I'm also trying to keep my distance for my own peace of mind. This will be my final update, thanks to everyone who followed my story and offered advice and support. This past year has been one of the toughest of my life. I'm planning to keep focusing on the positive, using the inheritance to build a better life for myself and to help others. I've learned that sometimes the best way to move forward is to let go of the past and focus on making a difference in the present. Thanks again, Reddit. I'm finally at peace with everything that's happened, and I'm looking forward to the future.